What's up, weirdos? I'm Felicia and I like scary movies, and you're gonna notice two differences in today's video. One, different background, not in front of my posters, trying something new. And two, new intro, very exciting. Now, before we get into today's video, I do want to take a second to talk about the Black Lives Matter movement. I personally would feel disrespectful if I didn't mention it on my channel because it's currently one of the biggest civil rights movements in our history. There are protests going on in all 50 states in the US and other countries all around the world. Over the last week, we have seen some horrifying displays of police brutality that have been alive and well in the US since we were formed. But I think we're talking about it in a way right now that is super important. And I just wanted to use my platform, if this is a platform, to mention it and also link some resources down below if you guys want to help. Everyone can do their part and choose an action that works for them, whether that's going to a protest, making a donation to an organization you believe in, or even just spreading information. However you can help is awesome. So I'm linking some resources down below for you guys, but I did want to take a minute to mention it. Thank you all so much for listening, and thank you to everyone that has been working for this cause. Now, let's get into today's video. We are talking about Shirley. This movie just came out. It is streaming on Hulu and also on Amazon. If I was really smart, I would have streamed it on Hulu, but I was too excited, so I rented it for the monies on Amazon. Do what you will. Now, I've been really excited about this movie for a long time because I love Shirley Jackson. She was a very famous horror writer. She wrote some of my favorite books like We Have Always Lived at the Castle and Haunting of Hill House. She also wrote the short story The Lottery, which I feel like a lot of people had to read in school. I think I read it in high school for a class once. I also knew Elizabeth Moss was going to be playing Shirley Jackson, and the whole combo seemed extremely exciting to me. Now, first of all, this is based on the 2014 novel by Susan Scarf Morell. So this is a work of fiction. It is, of course, based on Shirley Jackson and her life and what we know about her life, but the events that take place in this book and movie are not necessarily true. Before we even get into plot, I do want to just give a shout out for having such a strong female team on this movie. The screenplay was by Sarah Gubbins and it was directed by Josephine Decker. I don't know a lot about Josephine Decker's work, but I went on her IMDb and these movie posters, I was just thrilled by these posters, so I can't wait to see more of her work. Now, for some plot. This movie seems to be taking place around 1950 when Shirley Jackson was working on her second novel, Hangs a Man. That book is about a college student that descends into madness, which just happens to happen to a lot of Shirley Jackson characters. Okay, so that's sort of the setting, and Shirley and her husband, Stanley Hyman, take in this young couple, Fred and Rose. Stanley Hyman was a literary critic and college professor, and so Fred sort of ends up assisting Stanley at the college, and Rose ends up assisting Shirley Jackson in the home to help alleviate some of the pressures of being a woman who also makes things. Now, as I mentioned, a lot of Shirley Jackson books are about women who descend into madness for whatever reason, and that is sort of what this movie feels like. And sometimes it feels like a fever dream. There's a lot of confusion, but also moments of clarity. And it's just, you know, about this young couple that sort of fall under the spell of Shirley and Stanley in this big ivy-covered house. A lot of the movie focuses on the relationship between Shirley and Rose. Rose, at the start of the movie, is pregnant and has to drop out of college and is dealing with the pressures of having to leave any pursuits she had behind in order to raise a baby for Fred and be the homemaker. While Shirley is this woman that in the movie has no children, even though she had children in real life, but is this famous author who everyone thinks is so brilliant but also so scary, and goes in and out of depression, other mental illness. Shirley Jackson was also agoraphobic. She was scared to leave her house. So there's just a lot happening in this house. I'm sorry if that was not a very helpful plot, but let's get into what I loved about this movie. First of all, I loved how the story was structured. It actually kind of reminded me of Julie and Julia, that movie about Julia Child, even though it has nothing like that movie. But this idea where you have a very infamous, mysterious kind of figure, and we get to spend time with that person we want to know about, but we also get the perspective of Rose and her perception of Shirley Jackson. So we kind of get both looks at this character. And by the way, I will definitely say Elizabeth Moss, who is amazing in this movie, like, so good. But there is something about her portrayal of Shirley Jackson that sort of takes the woman, makes her a character, and makes her a character that feels like someone in a Shirley Jackson novel. if that makes sense. So it is theatricalized and heightened. The next thing I loved is that it's just so clearly written and directed by women. I could feel it in the movie before I looked up any information about it. First of all, the women in this movie are just so complicated and we get to know them so intimately, but the whole thing just like feels like female energy. It feels like female sexuality and female fury, all of those things I just could feel in this movie. And that includes how they look at feminism and traditional female roles. This does once again take place in the 1950s, and it ends up kind of having this message of like the traditional female role that women can be stuck in. That is the madness. The madness everyone else thinks is madness is actually the clarity, if that makes sense. The next thing I liked is I liked how they approached the complicated relationship between Shirley Jackson and Stanley Hyman. Apparently, from what I've read, Stanley Hyman was just totally an asshole. He slept with a lot of his students. He kind of forced Shirley Jackson into being in an open relationship, which she did not want to be in. He also took total control of Shirley Jackson's income, even when she was making a whole lot more money than he was. But the way that they chose to portray their relationship in this movie as extremely toxic, as, what's the word when you're on a plane? Turbulent? Turbulent. That all felt well done to me. And lastly, these are funny things to like about a movie, but it's because it is about a woman whose life I'm very interested in. But I did appreciate how they dealt with Shirley Jackson's health problems and mental illness that altogether eventually led to her early death at 48. It all felt very genuine to me, and you were sort of able to draw a line to where she was in that movie to where she ended up years after this movie took place. Before I go, I do want to mention a couple of other cast members. So Stanley was played by Michael Stolberg. He did a great job. Fred was played by Logan Lerman, who is from Perks of Being a Wallflower, a book and a movie I love. And then Rose was played by Odessa Young. And I thought Odessa Young and Elizabeth Moss, their performances together were so intimate and scary and amazing. I just thought both those actresses worked together so well in this movie, and I just loved it. I don't have any dislikes. I just love this movie. So if you want to check it out, it is on Hulu or Amazon. I will link it down below for you. But dang it, Shirley Jackson's awesome. Let me know if you already have seen it or plan on checking it out down in the comments. And I think that's it, people. Have a nice screen. Bye.